Raymond leaned back in his leather chair and stated nonchalantly, "After 18 years, we're eliminating your department, Carol. Cuts to the budget. Pack by Wednesday." He sounded as flat as if he were placing a lunch order. I nodded placidly as I sat across from him. "I fully understand." It was almost laughable, the relief that swept across his face. He had anticipated sobs, rage, or at the very least, some compromise. Rather, I got up, straightened my skirt, and left his office with a proud stance. "I'm Carol Jennings, and I've learned one valuable thing over my 58 years on this planet. Patience is rewarded." I developed the compliance department at Hollowgate Systems in Seattle, Washington, from a one-person operation to a group of 15 committed professionals over the course of over 20 years. We served as the organization's immune system, stopping illnesses before they had a chance to spread. The business was little, tenacious, and taking shortcuts when I started. I handled growing budgets, trained employees, put strict procedures into place, and kept us out of problems with the law. We contributed to Hollowgate's transformation from a local player to a reputable data security brand. The corporation avoided millions of dollars in fines and litigation because to our department. And Raymond Shaw had just thrown us out with less thought than a magazine subscription cancellation. Upon returning to my work, I opened my drawer and examined the little voice recorder that I had stored inside for the previous 3 years. Today's recording was the last one I would require, so I hit stop. I then took out my phone and contacted our head of legal, Janine Brooks, saying we need to meet on Wednesday. Private. It's crucial. She responded right away, 10 a.m. in my workplace. Raymond had been brought in during a management change 3 years prior. Straight out of a competition with a slicked-back hairstyle and NBA lingo, he started advocating for efficiency and simplifying changes right away. However, he saw compliance as nothing more than red tape, superfluous red tape that prevented the business from making more money. Initially, it was minor in nature, rushing approvals without enough assessment and omitting mandatory refresher trainings. Then followed the backdated certificates, the forged signatures on compliance documents, and the explicit directives to disregard established procedures. He consistently said, "Just make it happen, Carol," when I confronted him. No one is harmed. Everyone benefits. Raymond never realized that my love of bureaucracy was the reason I hadn't dedicated my professional life to compliance. I took this action because I had witnessed what occurs when businesses put short-term profits ahead of long-term ethics. People lose their employment. People's lives are destroyed. In fact, people do get harmed sometimes. I thus kept a record of everything. Every order to take shortcuts, every fabricated report, every possible infraction, all of it was painstakingly planned out and triple-checked. Because I knew that Raymond would ultimately take action against the department that he considered to be nothing more than a barrier. And he had now. Growing up in a blue-collar family in Tacoma, I learned early that the world doesn't reward good people simply for being good. My father worked 40 years at the shipyard, only to be laid off 6 months before his pension would have vested. The company restructured, and suddenly, decades of loyalty meant nothing. He never recovered from that betrayal, spending his final years bitter and broken. "They'll smile while they stab you in the back, Carrie," he told me. "Always keep your eyes open." I carried that lesson with me throughout my career. When I joined Hollowgate Systems in 2006, it was a promising company with good products but loose operations. The founders were brilliant engineers who needed someone to build infrastructure around their innovations. I became that someone. Year after year, I expanded our compliance framework as the company grew. I hired the right people, developed training programs, and created systems that protected both the company and its clients. The previous CEO, Thomas Miller, understood the value we provided and supported our work fully. "Carol runs the department that keeps us all employed," he used to say at company meetings. "When she talks, we listen." But Thomas retired 5 years ago, and the new leadership team had different priorities: quarterly results, market share growth at all costs. Raymond Shaw epitomized this new direction. The first time I sensed trouble was during a quarterly review meeting in 2021. Raymond interrupted my presentation on updated data security requirements. "Carol, these extra steps are killing our deployment schedule," he said, not bothering to hide his irritation. "Our competitors aren't doing all this. We need to be more flexible." After the meeting, he pulled me aside. "Look, I respect what you've built here, but times are changing. Sometimes we need to interpret regulations creatively." That night, I purchased the voice recorder. Over the following months, Raymond's creative interpretations became increasingly brazen. He directed teams to ship products before security testing was complete. He had my staff falsify training records for audits. He personally signed off on compliance certifications without performing the required reviews. Each violation went into my growing file. I wasn't being vindictive, I was protecting myself and my team. If anything went wrong, Raymond would ensure we took the fall. I'd seen it happen before. My department became a target for his frustration. He cut our budget repeatedly, blocked promotions for my staff, and excluded us from key meetings. Still, we persisted, doing our best to maintain standards despite increasing pressure. I never expected him to eliminate the entire department. That was bolder than I thought even Raymond would dare. But I was prepared nonetheless. Tuesday morning, the day after Raymond's bombshell announcement, the compliance department was in chaos. My team gathered in our conference room, faces displaying various stages of shock, anger, and fear. 18 years and this is how they treat us, said Vivian, my deputy, who'd been with me for 12 years. No warning, no transition plan. It's unbelievable. What about our ongoing projects? Asked Thomas, our newest team member. The ISO certification is due next month. Who's handling that? I let them vent their frustrations for a few minutes before calling the room to order. I know this is difficult news, and it's completely unfair, but right now, we need to focus on documenting everything and ensuring a clean handover. Handover to whom? Vivian asked bitterly. They're scrapping everything we've built. I met her gaze steadily. Just because they're eliminating our department doesn't mean the work disappears. Someone will have to pick up these responsibilities, and they'll need our documentation. The team looked unconvinced, but they trusted me. We spent the day organizing files, creating process guides, and preparing handover notes. Throughout it all, I maintained a calm exterior, though inside I was cycling through my own emotions, first disbelief, then white-hot anger, and finally cold determination. During lunch, I slipped away to meet with Philip Johnson from IT Security. He'd been an ally over the years, often backing me in disagreements with Raymond. I heard what happened, he said as we sat in a cafe across from the office. It's insane. The auditors will have a field day when they discover there's no compliance function. That's assuming they discover it, I replied. Raymond's probably planning to distribute our responsibilities across departments, making it look like everything's covered. Philip shook his head. Classic Shaw move. Eliminate the expertise, keep the window dressing. I leaned forward. Philip, I need a favor. Can you preserve the access log showing who modified our compliance documentation system over the past 3 years and the backup copies of the original documents? His eyes widened slightly. Carol, what are you planning? I'm planning to protect this company from Raymond's recklessness, I said simply. Will you help? He didn't hesitate. The logs will be in your email by end of day. Just be careful. Back at the office, I found an envelope on my desk. Inside was a termination agreement. In exchange for 2 months' severance pay, I would waive any right to contest my termination and agree to a non-disclosure clause about company operations. The amount was insultingly small for someone of my tenure and position. This was Raymond's final humiliation, expecting me to sign away nearly 2 decades of service for a pittance. I placed the unsigned agreement in my drawer next to the recorder. Tomorrow, I would bring everything to Janine Brooks. The head of legal had always been professional with me, though we weren't close. But I knew her reputation for integrity. For the first time since Raymond's announcement, I allowed myself a small smile. He thought Wednesday would be my end at Hollowgate. He was wrong. It would be his. Wednesday morning arrived with gloomy Seattle rain that matched the mood in our department. People moved silently through their final tasks, occasionally stopping to exchange contact information or quiet words of encouragement. I had arranged a goodbye lunch for later, but first, I had my meeting with Janine. I arrived at her office at precisely 10 a.m., carrying a nondescript accordion folder. Her assistant nodded me in immediately. Janine Brooks was a formidable woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her office was immaculate, with law degrees and professional certifications displayed on one wall and family photos on another. A reminder that she was both accomplished and human. "Carol," she said, rising to shake my hand. "I was sorry to hear about your department. These restructurings are never easy." "Thank you," I replied, taking a seat across from her desk. "But I'm not here to complain about the elimination of my position." Her eyebrow lifted slightly. "What can I help you with then?" I placed the folder on her desk. "For the past 3 years, I've been documenting systematic compliance violations directed by Raymond Shaw. What began as cutting corners has evolved into potentially criminal violations of data security laws, falsification of regulatory filings, and fraud." Janine's expression remained neutral, but she sat up straighter. "Those are serious allegations." "They're not allegations. They're documented facts," I said, opening the folder. "This contains emails, memos, meeting notes, and audio recordings that prove Raymond has been deliberately circumventing compliance requirements and falsifying documentation." I laid out evidence methodically. Emails where Raymond explicitly directed staff to skip required security protocols, recordings of meetings where he ordered backdating of compliance certificates, documentation showing his signature on verification forms for reviews he never conducted. Janine examined each piece carefully, her frown deepening. When she reached the section on client data handling violations, she looked up sharply. "If this is accurate, we've been misrepresenting our security protocols to federal clients. That's potentially criminal." "It is accurate," I confirmed. "I've included the original requirements, Raymond's directives to bypass them, and evidence of false certification submitted to clients and regulators." She leaned back, tapping her pen against the desk. "Why bring this to me now, Carol? Why not earlier?" It was a fair question. I tried addressing these issues internally first. I have documentation of 7 meetings with Raymond where I raised concerns. Each time, he dismissed them and increased pressure on my department. When that didn't work, he began excluding us from project reviews where we would have identified violations. I paused, then added, "I was planning to bring this to you next month after our annual compliance audit." The elimination of my department accelerated the timeline. "I see." Janine closed the folder and sat in silence for a moment. "You understand I'll need to verify all of this?" "Of course. Everything is organized by incident, with supporting documentation. The flash drive contains the audio recordings and additional electronic evidence. Philip Johnson and IT Security can confirm the authenticity of the system logs." She nodded, then asked a question that caught me off guard. "What do you want from this, Carol?" I'd been so focused on exposing Raymond that I hadn't fully considered my own desired outcome. "I want the company to address these violations before they cause real harm. Some may require disclosure to clients or regulators." Beyond that, I met her gaze steadily. "I want Raymond Shaw held accountable for putting Hollowgate at risk to advance his own career." "That's it? You're not seeking reinstatement or compensation?" I shook my head. "This isn't about my job. It's about doing what's right." Janine studied me for a long moment. "I'll need to take this to the CEO. Can you be available tomorrow morning?" "I'll make myself available." As I stood to leave, she added, "Carol, don't discuss this with anyone else for now, and thank you for bringing it to us rather than outside authorities." I nodded and left, feeling a strange mix of relief and anticipation. The wheels were in motion. I spent the afternoon with my team at our goodbye lunch, trying to focus on their concerns rather than my meeting with Janine. We gathered at Bailey's, a restaurant near the office that had hosted countless department celebrations over the years. The owner recognized us and offered a private room at no extra charge, a small kindness that nearly broke my composure. As we shared memories and exchanged promises to stay in touch, I felt a stab of guilt. These people had trusted me, followed my lead, and now their careers were in limbo. Even if my evidence resulted in action against Raymond, it wouldn't automatically restore their jobs. "I want to thank all of you," I said, raising my glass of iced tea. "The work we've done has been important, even if it wasn't always appreciated. I'm proud of what we accomplished together. And I have no doubt each of you will go on to success elsewhere." Vivian wiped away a tear. "It won't be the same without your leadership, Carol. You taught us that integrity matters, even when it's inconvenient." "Especially when it's inconvenient," I corrected gently, and the group chuckled. After lunch, I returned to the office to finish clearing my desk. As I was packing the last of my personal items, Raymond appeared in my doorway. "All set to go, Carol?" he asked too cheerfully. "I'll need your badge and company phone before you leave." I handed them over without comment. His smile faltered slightly at my calm compliance. "Listen, I know this is difficult, but business decisions aren't personal. I've always respected your thoroughness." The condescension in his voice made my skin crawl, but I maintained my professional demeanor. "Of course, Raymond. Business is business." He nodded, apparently satisfied that I was accepting my fate without trouble. "The severance agreement, did you have a chance to review it?" "I did," I replied neutrally. "And I'll have my response by tomorrow." Something in my tone must have alerted him because his eyes narrowed slightly. "The terms are standard, Carol. I'd advise not dragging this out." "Thank you for your concern," I said, closing my box of belongings. "I'll be in touch." As I walked past him toward the elevator, I felt his gaze following me. For the first time, there was uncertainty in his expression. Good. Let him wonder. I had just reached my car when my phone buzzed with a text from Philip. "You should know, RS accessed compliance systems after hours last night. Appears he was modifying documentation. All changes logged per your request." My heart raced. This was unexpected, but not surprising. Raymond was covering his tracks, not realizing we had preserved the original records. His actions only strengthened our case against him. I texted back, "Thank you. Can you secure those logs immediately?" His response came quickly. "Already done. Sent to your personal email with encryption. Key phrase is your favorite saying from our first meeting." I smiled, remembering when Philip and I had first worked together 8 years ago. I had told him in compliance, "We're not the party police. We're the people who make sure everyone gets home safely after the party." That evening, I received another message. This one from Janine. "CEO reviewed initial evidence. Emergency board meeting called for tomorrow, 9 a.m. Your presence requested at 11 a.m. confidential." As I prepared for bed, I received one final text from Raymond himself. "Carol, let's meet for coffee tomorrow. 8 a.m. Need to discuss your transition package, potential for improvement, if we can align." So he was getting nervous. Perhaps he discovered that I'd met with Janine, or maybe he was just trying to secure my silence. Either way, his timing was telling. I texted back, "Unfortunately not available at 8. Happy to speak by phone." His response came immediately. "Dinner then, my treat. Sorry, prior commitment. We'll call you tomorrow afternoon." I turned off my phone, not waiting for his reply. Tomorrow would be soon enough to watch Raymond Shaw's carefully constructed facade crumble. Thursday morning, I dressed with particular care, a charcoal suit I reserved for important presentations, pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother, and a silk scarf in Hollowgate signature blue. If this was to be my final appearance at the company, I would face it with dignity. The call from Janine came at 10:30 a.m. "The board is ready for you now. Can you come directly to the executive conference room on the 12th floor? I'm already in the building." "I'll be right up." I had arrived early, sitting quietly in the lobby cafe where I could observe the comings and goings. I'd seen Raymond arrive at 7:45, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. At 8:30, two board members had entered together, their expressions grim. By 9:15, the entire executive team had hurried in, none stopping for their usual coffee. As I rode the elevator to the 12th floor, I took deep breaths to calm my racing heart. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about accountability. The executive conference room was imposing. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Seattle skyline, and a massive table of polished walnuts stood at the center. 12 serious faces turned toward me as I entered. Raymond sat at the far end, his face ashen. Beside him was Gerald Winters, the CEO, whose normally affable expression had been replaced by something much harder. "Miss Jennings, thank you for joining us," said Eleanor Richardson, the board chairwoman. "Please take a seat." I sat in the empty chair, directly across from Raymond. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "We've spent the morning reviewing the evidence you provided to Miss Brooks," Eleanor continued. "We've also heard Mr. Shaw's response to these allegations." Gerald leaned forward. "Before we continue, I want to be clear. We're treating this matter with the utmost seriousness. The board has authorized a full independent investigation." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "I appreciate that. What we need from you now," Eleanor said, "is to understand why you collected this evidence over 3 years without bringing it to the attention of the board or outside authorities." It was a fair question, but also a defensive one. They were concerned about their own liability. "I did raise these issues through proper channels initially," I replied calmly. "I have documentation of multiple attempts to address compliance violations with Mr. Shaw directly. When that proved ineffective, I began documenting the issues more comprehensively." "That doesn't answer why you waited 3 years," pressed one of the board members. "Because I believed in this company and wanted to resolve the issues internally," I said. I was building a case that couldn't be dismissed as a misunderstanding or a difference in interpretation. And frankly, I hoped Mr. Shaw would correct course before it became necessary to take this step. Raymond finally spoke, his voice tight. "This is clearly retaliatory." Carol was upset about losing her position. And actually, Janine interrupted, "The first documented incident in Miss Jennings' evidence predates any discussion of department elimination by nearly 3 years, and the electronic logs confirm the timeline." Eleanor turned to me again. "Miss Jennings, in light of what we've learned, we'd like to discuss your continued relationship with Hollowgate." I met her gaze steadily. "With respect, Chairwoman, my concern is not for my position. It's for the company's integrity and the potential harm to clients from these violations." "Nevertheless," Gerald interjected, "we believe it would be in everyone's interest if you would consider returning to help us address these issues." Before I could respond, the door opened and a man in a crisp suit entered, nodding to Eleanor. "This is Mr. Atkins from our outside counsel," she explained. "Given the potential legal implications, he'll be joining us." As Mr. Atkins took his seat, Raymond stood abruptly. "This is absurd. I've built this company's market position over the past 5 years, while compliance has been nothing but a cost center." "Sit down, Mr. Shaw," Eleanor said sharply. "Your future with this company is very much in question at this moment." I watched as the realization dawned on Raymond's face. This wasn't a meeting to manage a problem employee. It was the beginning of his downfall. 1 week after my meeting with the board, I sat in Gerald Winters' office, reviewing the findings of the independent investigation. The results were even more damning than my evidence had suggested. Raymond's violations extended beyond my department, affecting product development, client contracts, and financial reporting. "The board has terminated Raymond's employment effective immediately," Gerald informed me. "We've also self-reported the relevant violations to regulatory authorities and initiated contact with affected clients." I nodded, feeling not triumph, but profound relief. "That's the responsible approach. We'd like you to head our newly expanded compliance and ethics division," Gerald continued, with expanded authority, direct reporting to the board, and a seat on the executive committee. The offer was everything I could have wanted professionally, but I hesitated. What about my team? We're offering positions to all 15 members with increased responsibilities and appropriate compensation adjustments, he assured me. The board recognizes now that eliminating compliance was short-sighted. That's putting it mildly, I observed. Gerald had the grace to look embarrassed. I should have been more attentive to the concerns you raised over the years. For that, I apologize. I considered his offer carefully. The easy path would be to accept, return to the position I'd built, and continue my work. But something had fundamentally changed. I appreciate the offer, Gerald, but I need time to consider it. The past week has been clarifying for me. Despite his shocked expression, he nodded. Of course, the offer is still available. I passed where Raymond used to be when I was leaving his office. His name was already being removed off the door by workers. Previously avoiding eye contact, 3 executives now nodded and smiled to meet me. The word had gotten out fast. I checked my phone in the elevator and discovered 3 missed calls from executive recruiters, as well as a text message from Vivian saying, "Team meeting at Bailey's 5 p.m." I have some big news to share. I grinned. Without Hollowgate, my crew was already on the move. I knew I was too when the elevator doors opened onto the foyer. I was speaking to the crowd at the National Compliance Officers Conference in Dallas 6 months later. The audience was packed for my keynote address, Ethical Guardianship in the Age of Acceleration. I came to the conclusion that compliance isn't just about rules and regulations. The goal is to establish a society in which doing morally is not considered extraordinary. It is anticipated. When honesty is a common value rather than a department. The clapping was satisfying, but what was more significant were the nods from experts who knew how difficult it was to maintain standards in settings where profit and haste were the main priorities. A young woman then came up to me in the reception. "Many of us have found inspiration in your narrative, Miss Jennings. The way you defended your beliefs despite the consequences to yourself is what this line of work should be all about." I said, "Thank you," moved by her genuineness. However, keep in mind that documentation is only recorded if no action is taken. Knowing when to put what you've learned into action is the most difficult aspect. She gave a sincere nod. "Please tell me more about your new consulting business." I started Jennings Integrity Advisors after turning down Gerald's invitation to work at Hollowgate, assisting businesses in creating strong ethical frameworks as opposed to merely checking boxes for compliance. We already had 4 states with clients, and there were more on the waiting list. Even more unexpectedly, Hollowgate had grown to be our largest customer. With my old team acting as internal partners in the transition, Gerald had engaged us to completely reinvent their compliance culture. In contrast, Raymond had not done well. Similar trends have been found at Hollowgate's prior jobs during the regulatory examinations that were prompted by his self-disclosure. He was now at risk of civil fines after his security professional accreditation was withdrawn. I thought about how justice frequently comes at its own time, but it does come. My new existence seemed perfect even if it hadn't been planned. Use my knowledge to assist others in avoiding the errors I have personally seen. My 18 years at Hollowgate had taught me valuable insights that now serve as the cornerstone for assisting other firms in creating cultures that value integrity over compliance. Every business I recommended was one where executives recognized that taking short routes would ultimately result in longer, more expensive roads, and where workers could perform their duties without sacrificing their morals.